hearing what Shelby has to share with us. So let's start off with. Well, I forgot to mention that I'm also from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation, and I'm in Shoal Lake 40 right now. And I'm currently working with four communities on a residential school project. And we are currently in the phase of starting ground search penetration. So I am assisting with that process. And I just got off of the lake from transporting people to that school site, which used to be called Cecilia Jeffrey School, residential school. And Vivian was a student of the school once it was moved from Shoal Lake to Kenora. So it's a special day to be able to join Vivian on this conversation that we're about to have. So with that, I'll start with Vivian and ask her to tell us a little bit about her time in residential school, and maybe what are some of the early moments that you still have and carry that you feel today.
Okay, just a little bit of history. I'm a second generation residential school survivor. My dad actually attended Shoal Lake, Cecil Jeffrey when it was, I think it was at Shoal Lake, and then they moved it to Round Lake. And my mom also attended St. Mary's Catholic School, which was located just off my reserve, Rat Portage. I can't pronounce. I apologize to my band. I can't pronounce the name. I don't have my teeth in, but oh well. I was maybe about 5 or 6 years old when I first attended Cecil Jeffrey. I don't remember the exact moment. Maybe my mind decided not to process that moment. I know that the first thing I saw was the dorms. That there was a large dorm with bunk beds in that, and then there was a smaller dorm. And I just remember the uh, the sheets, the blankets were really itchy, flat pillows, itchy blankets. They didn't smell like sunshine, like the way my mom had them. And I'm so used to being connected to family. I'm used to sleeping with my sisters and I was used to having my mom and dad nearby. If I got scared, I'd go crawl into bed with them. I didn't have that, so that isolation got to me. And late at night, I'd be sitting there in bed. I think that still haunts me. Little kids crying, but this is a different type of crying, sobbing. You weren't allowed to cry out loud because you weren't supposed to make any noise after dark. These were kids crying softly. You could hear them breaking, their their insides breaking, their souls breaking, their spirits breaking, crying so softly because they knew their mom and dad weren't going to be there. Their sisters or brothers weren't going to be there. They were in the hellhole. I think that's what haunts me to this day. And I still see the flashlight of the house mother coming down. Sometimes I wake up and I expect to see that flashlight of the house mother near my bed. I expect strange hands touching me in my bed. That's what I still carry to this day. Yeah.
Thank you, Vivian. So we do know that the residential school systems didn't just harm the children, but they also affected, literally tore apart families,
Mhm.
the family structures, generations, and communities. So how would you can you share with us what it was like when you were younger to return home once the schools were closed? And how did it affect the family when it came to reconnecting and reuniting with the parents and the community?
There was no reconnection. My Cecil Jeffrey closed in 1976. The parents that I went home to, they were different. They smelled funny. There was a lot of drinking. There was a lot of fighting. And I was actually told my dad by my older sister having his kids stolen, broke them. And there was a lot of drinking, a lot of fighting. It was dangerous, and I when I went to residential school, that fear in my stomach was what they gave me. And when I went home, it got even worse. My parents were not the same. They were a lot of drinking and that, and then I would occasionally stay home for a little while until the violence and that got too bad, and then I'd get sent to foster homes. It was just like shift. Never, there was no more connection. That connection was broken and lost.
Right, right. And along the way, some of the families have been able to overcome and break some of those cycles. And you
Mm.
yourself have a really great story in how you have overcome so much in your time with loss, and but yet you still managed to find a way to keep going for yourself. Can you share with some of your journey that helped you keep going and that allows you to continue some of the work that you do today?
Okay, well, my dad passed away when I was 18. Um, and that, and I became a young mother. I met my life partner in a bar Friday the 13th. I became a parent. He's actually my life partner was really beneficial in me healing, uh, and my son too. But then when I was first, I drank quite a bit. I gotta admit that. And then I did sober up. Though it's funny how I sobered up. My son was just a toddler, and I thought I was doing a lot of drinking in that. And then this woman comes to my back door. She's an indigenous woman from a shelter or whatever nearby. And I tried. My place was messy, and I tried telling she would. I noticed that she didn't cringe at my dirty kitchen or how I smelled. I didn't smell too good. I smelled like last night booze, and um, and that kind of got to me. And said, she's not a Jehovah Witness that I can get rid of easily. So when she started sharing her story about how she sobered up and how she started walking the road, and I said, okay, we're gonna listen to her, then she'll get the hell out of my place. And but she told me she shared her story, which caught tidbits of it. And she said, well, I'm gonna come back later on this evening, and I'll take you back to the house where we can start you sobering up. I said, okay, because I just wanted her out. I wanted her out because I had plans. And then sure enough, that damn woman comes back and packs me up and puts me in the woman transition center, and that began my true journey of healing, because this was the Indigenous uh, treatment center where all the counselors were women. Um, One of them was actually one of my elders from back home, and it was a good thing that when all of them were Indigenous, because I was rough, and I know that I couldn't fight them because they're more likely to kick my ass. um, Another time, and then I was a bully in there, and that my counselor actually told me that she told me that I wasn't supposed to do this and this, like I'm not supposed to be physically abusive or verbally abusive to other clients. I said okay, and she wrote it down on a piece of paper. And can you sign it? I said so. I signed it, and that woman puts it on the bulletin board for all the other clients to see. And they said if I broke any of those rules, I was going to be out of the treatment center. I was a top dog in that treatment center, but the reason I was top dog because I was abusive and mean to the other woman. And as soon as they put that thing on the board, all the women came after me because they knew that they were trying to get me out of there. And I nearly broke. I took that piece of paper off the bulletin board. I took it to my counselor. I said, "Can you hold this for a minute? I got a woman to talk to." She told me, um, "Put it back on the board. And you'd go take a walk." It was like, oh, and that was the start. And my sister actually took care of my son for about a year while I sobered up. I really had to work on the foundation and that. And my counselor one time um, he said, why do you want to sober up? I said, I want to sober up for my son. No, she told me, you don't sober up for your son because if you relapse, you go back to drinking, you're going to blame your son. You got to sober up for yourself. And that was these were some hard truths that I was dealing with. and I didn't have the bottle to hide in. I wish they could run rehab center like that, but they unfortunately can't. Um, and now I that was the foundation for me to begin the healing, and that was just one of my stories of healing, and that. Yeah.
Hmm. And I've also heard you speak about how the child welfare system today is the new form of residential school. And you also have had experience having to deal with child welfare. Maybe you can share with us how you relate that from your residential school experience to the child welfare experience and how it is a new form of residential school.
Okay. I had a second son. He was just a baby, and then he was put in a white foster home, and that woman, the family, fell in love with my son, and they said I wasn't a good mother. Bottom line short, he was stolen from me. Um, Meanwhile, I said, how could I not? How could I be not a good son to my second son when when I was a great mother to my first son? They got a lawyer. I got a lawyer. My son had a lawyer. That white woman wanted my son. She got my son. I lost him. I still I've lost my connection to my son. Just like what happened to me when I was in residential school. The system wanted me. They used laws and regulations to make sure I stayed in residential school. There were laws to keep us in residential school. Our parents had to give us up. So I had to give up my son because of the Child and Family Services system. Yeah.
Okay. Do you feel that with some of the new changes in legislation right now, communities leaning in the direction of developing their own family laws, do you feel that you have some comfort or confidence in that process?
Not really, because I was recently went to a event with another activist where we're protesting about the um, the child and family system here in Winnipeg, and I went to support her. That the next day, the news came out of those three children that got hurt in a non-Indigenous home. There's still a lot of work to be done. There's still children being taken from the hospital. Um, it hasn't changed. Very little has changed. If I'm getting called to support a parent in a hospital bed to make sure that her child isn't stolen,
Hmm.
still we're still like in the 1960s, 1970s. Nothing has changed. A child has seriously gotten hurt from being in a child and family home.
Absolutely. There seems to be the common trend of isolation,
Mm.
disconnection, whether it's through birth alerts.
Yeah.
There's the still forms of genocide that are still being practiced.
Mm.
And that will lead us into the conversation about the reproductive justice. And that's something that we're starting to hear more about now that more women are starting to come out. So when I think about reproductive justice, I don't really know what that means too much yet, but we heard stories about it a long time ago from our parents that that was a practice to kind of um, as a form of genocide against our Indigenous population. So I want to go back to Shelby. If maybe you can gently walk us through on what forced or coerced sterilization looks like, and what does it mean when we say someone didn't give full or informed consent?
Okay, so hello, um, I'm Shelby Ponace. So, my advocacy journey began um, pretty soon after I gave birth to my second baby, which is my last son. So I was coerced into sterilization in 2018. So 7 years ago. Um, during the process, I was going through my labor and delivery, and I had a doctor come up and ask me if I wanted a tubal ligation. And at 24, you don't understand what a tubal ligation is. You don't realize how permanent it is. So, I was coerced into that while going through delivery, which many survivors are. Um, so I reached out to Elisa Lombard, who is part of a law firm, and there is a class action lawsuit for forced or coerced sterilization survivors. So I reached out, and I got connected with them, sharing my story, because I still wasn't sure if I was a survivor. Um, I started doing interviews, and I got connected to Senator Yvonne Boyer, who is the senator who is working to amend the Criminal Act and have sterilization procedures criminalized. So she's working. When I joined the advocacy, it was built as 250, but now it's built as 228, and she actually has a reading this evening in the Senate. So when I started doing that important work, I shared my witness statement in front of the House of Common. I shared my experience, and I got involved with the advocacy movement, and that eventually led to the launch of the Survivor Circle for Reproductive Justice, which I've utilized a lot in my healing journey. So to answer your question, um, I first want to define what consent means. So, a lot of people, they think that forced or coerced sterilization is only forced. And after sharing my story, a lot of survivors come forward because it resonates with their experience. So what consent means is people must be given clear, full, and accurate information about what is being done to them, the risks and benefits, the alternatives that they may have, and the right to say yes or no without feeling pressured. Um, so uninformed consent can look like when information is being withheld, um, when people are being pressured, feeling manipulated, or coerced. Language and cultural barriers it prevents the true understanding, or there's a power imbalance. So, uninformed consent is when someone says yes, but without the knowledge, freedom, or understanding needed to make an accurate, real choice. And then, coercion. So there's uninformed consent that means no real knowledge is being passed on. And coercion, it means forcing or pressuring someone to do something against their will. So there's no real choice. So uninformed consent means no real knowledge, so you don't know what you're consenting to. Coercion means you have no real choice to say what you truly want. And coercion can involve direct force, so threats of harm, punishment, violence if the person refuses. Um, Indirect forces, which include manipulation, intimidation, or taking advantage of someone's vulnerability. And then there's the abuse of power, when someone uses their position to push someone into agreeing. And that can often look like a doctor telling you what they believe is right, without offering you any of the alternatives or speaking to you about the risks and benefits that can come with a tubal ligation. So, hearing so many stories, um, a lot of people, even myself, I wonder, like, is am I a survivor of this because I signed a consent form? But, someone might sign a consent form, but, that wasn't true consent. That signature wasn't true consent because it was based on a lack of knowledge, or feeling pressured, or a little bit of both. Um, yeah.
Thank you, Shelby. 7 years ago doesn't seem like very long ago. You wouldn't think that, that would still happen in our country, in Canada. I think that's very outrageous. Maybe you can share a few examples, maybe of examples of how that might look. Someone that's being pressured or coerced into sterilization, and for someone that may be watching today, maybe they're logging in to to see if that might apply to them. Like, how would we help someone come forward to share their story?
Okay, so you know, based on a lot of examples I've heard, there's a lot of shame that goes hand in hand with forced or coerced sterilization. And a lot of our older generation, they have a hard time admitting what happened because they have that shame, or they have that guilt. Um, like, I can share my example where I went into the hospital and I went to be induced. I was induced with my eldest, so I kind of had an idea of what was going to happen. But because of like a malpractice, um, I got pulled aside right, when they decided I needed an emergency C-section, and they start throwing a paper in front of me, telling me, you need to sign this. You need to sign this. This is so your baby will be born safe. This is what's best for you and your baby. If you don't sign this, you and your next baby will die, and that won't be our fault. That will be on you. And I didn't know what I was signing, and they were holding my emergency C-section above me if I didn't sign the form. And like, while you're in labor and delivery, that's a sacred, vulnerable moment. A lot of the elders I've spoken to say that it's ceremony. You go into ceremony when you're in the midst of delivering your baby. So for them to come to me in the middle of my sacred ceremony and force me into something I didn't know, I had no idea what I was signing into. As a 24-year-old mother, you don't know what a tubal ligation is unless you're sitting there googling. But while you're going into sepsis shock and you just want your baby born healthy, you as a mother, you sign anything to make sure that baby survives. And a lot of the other stories I've heard is, you know there have been CFS caseworkers sign off on minors for their sterilization. I had a social worker speak with me, and she said she was a very young social worker, and she was working with a family who adopted or were fostering a young Indigenous girl. And the foster parent went up to her and said, we need to get her sterilized. We need to stop allowing her to have her time because she bled all over my brand new blanket set. And the social worker signed off on that because she didn't understand that someone being sterilized was an act of genocide. Like, we think about the child welfare system and residential schools. They were aimed to kill the Indian in the child, to stop our culture, to stop those generations, and to as they call it, civilize Indigenous people. But you look at forced and coerced sterilization, and they don't just kill the Indian in the child, they remove any future generations. They remove the bloodlines from carrying on, and that's an act of biological or generational um, genocide.
Thank you, Shelby. You just pretty much answered what I was going to ask you about next. Uh, One of the things that I'm wondering about is, you mentioned that there's a class action lawsuit. How did that class action lawsuit begin? Was it like a one woman that really thought about what happened to her. Was it a group of women? And I'm also wondering about the numbers of potential Indigenous women that have had this happen to them versus non-Indigenous population. Did you have any information on that?
Okay, so I know it began, I believe, in like the mid 2000, like 15, and it started off with three women from Saskatoon, I believe, and they shared their experience, and they wanted to be heard, and you know, did a lot of work with different lawyers. Like when I started, I was working with a combined law firm, and they eventually branched off, and I went with the one I felt most comfortable with. But I know it, like the class action lawsuit was based on a lawsuit that happened in Alberta to a non-Indigenous woman who was disabled, and she ended up winning her lawsuit and was awarded, I think, over $7 million for being forced into sterilization, and she was a non-Indigenous disabled woman in Alberta. So it's, like it's been the work of, so many of I call them my survivor sisters, who have been, so brave to share their stories and receive all that backlash, and just really trying to navigate so all survivors can receive some kind of compensation. So I just, when after about, I knew what happened and how wrong it was, basically right when I got home from the hospital, and I started Googling, what happened to me, and I didn't have a term for it until I read um, what it was called, and realized that I was coerced into sterilization. And I remember, after I got back, I think I waited a couple weeks just for things to settle, to finally reach out to the lawyers who were, like, the law firm who was in charge of the pending class action lawsuit. So I knew pretty much immediately that something terrible happened to me. And the same, like, I come from a, like, my mom, she's non-Indigenous, my father is the status, but the same thing happened to my non-Indigenous mother. And I started speaking to her about it, and she was present during the procedure. So she started helping me kind of put the pieces together about what happened. And, like, we researched a lot and found out about the class action lawsuit. So I did a lot of, like, research about the history and the women who were leading, and, it gave me a lot of answers.
What was your initial reaction when you discovered that you were coerced into sterilization?
So with that, I like the first couple weeks of my son's life, it was kind of like a daze. Like, I disconnected. So something really important to me is acknowledging the family breakdown that comes with forced or coerced sterilization, similar to what you see with the child welfare system. Is I experience a lot of family breakdown. I experience a lot of that loss of identity, something also that goes hand in hand with the child welfare system. I began not to feel like I was a woman. Like, my ability to bear children was taken away from me. So I disconnected from my son a lot, and there was a lot of family breakdown. I started um, not wanting to be around family anymore, and just, you know get caught up with addiction, and my mental health was very, very, very bad. Um, I didn't feel like I should be with his dad anymore, because I felt that, like, oh, well, we can't have any more children. I don't want to weigh him down and not be able to give him any more children. So that it caused severe family breakdown. Um, I didn't feel connected to my son. There was so many, like, devastating effects that I felt. Like, it wasn't until he was 2 years old that I finally held his hand, and I realized like, hey, I made your hand, I made you. And like I shared prior that all of his first, I didn't celebrate his first steps, his first word. I looked at them instead as my last. So the last time I would have a baby taking his first steps. The last time, he would I would have a baby who said their first words. So instead of looking at it as in a positive sense, I looked at it in a very negative, um, kind of self-absorbed way. But I didn't know that what I was feeling was that grief and loss of not being able to bear children, and it really took its toll on me and my family. And like it has the same effects as the child and family services that we're dealing with.
Yes, absolutely. I see how that interrelates to what's happening to our Indigenous families. And I'm so sorry that has happened to you. I didn't think of it. It just struck me when you said you didn't look at it as a first, you looked at it as a last. So that's very powerful. And I thank you for sharing that with us all. You also mentioned about the compensation, and there's a huge disparity amongst compensation when it comes to residential school survivors, our children that were placed into foster care, reproductive justice. I hope that the group gets compensated very well, and also compared to the water claims that were also given out. My community was 21 years on boil water advisory, and that woman that got 7 million that you spoke about, that blows my mind because there's a huge compensation disparity when it comes to um, making the wrongs the right when it comes to Indigenous people. So, Vivian, moving on, we're just about to wrap up our conversation, and I just want to ask each of you. I'll start with Vivian on what healing looks like for families, for communities, and for future generations.
Okay. Um, this is gonna be a Roxanne. I appreciate this, but I'm gonna say something a little bit off topic about healing. Yes, we do need to heal. Um, we need to elect leaders. I don't care if they're indigenous or non-indigenous, but they gotta have lived experiences with us in our type of life. We also got to work at the bottom. We got to get leaders in that, woman in that. But I've been dealing with a private situation. I've been working all week doing presentations about my story, and I've been doing a lot more than usual. My older brother is dying or has died already, and I want to be there, but due to health reasons, I'm not able to. I wanted, I choose to share my story because there's a lot of denialism about residential school that is happening. I want him to know his story is valid. His story is going to heal him and others. And if he can no longer share his story because he died, then I'll pick up. I'll pick up that slack. I'll share my story. If I can share my story with one person, then that's one less denialism person that I'm talking to. Okay. I'm carrying on my family legacy by
Mhm.
sharing my story. Roxanne, I'm fine. I know I could feel your concern about me even through the online. Okay. I just sent him a message. I told him that I'm going online today. I'm talking about my residential schools experience. And I'm doing this because of what's happening. I have to fight harder. I have to be a little bit louder about my residential school experience because of idiots out there talking about that our stories are not real, that our little ones are not buried in graveyards. There's a search going on my reserve. they call them um, anomalies. They're not anomalies. They're my family members. So, Roxanne, I appreciate you um, letting me on here. I yes, I'm fine. If my brother, we're just waiting for a phone call. But if he has passed away, I'm gonna at least send him a voice message, letting him know that I'm coming on here to share my story, carrying on his legacy. His voice is important. His experience is important. His voice is real.
Thank you for sharing, Vivian.
Yep.
And you're right. We will continue the legacy through our stories, and each time we'll speak louder and louder. And I'm just glad to be able to listen and to help get your stories out there, Shelby and Vivian both. And my thoughts are with you, Vivian, during this time. And I've never seen you slow down ever. So I know you'll be okay, and we're here for you.
That's part of doing this work. Sometimes we got to put our personal behind us so that we can stand on the front lines, because there's a hell of a lot of unhealed people behind us, and we're making the path a little bit easier for those that are not healed yet.
Yes, absolutely. I just want to ask a question to Shelby. If justice was real and lived and not just spoken about, what would that look or feel like to you? And we have a few more questions also from the people that are watching.
So what Senator Yvonne Boyer is advocating for is the criminalization for doctors who perform these uninformed, unconsented, forced sterilizations. We are trying to criminalize that act. We are trying to hold people accountable, not just doctors, but nurses, healthcare workers, people who don't have that say, who made the choices. We have put our opinions down, and we wanted to have, it's not just all about punishment or getting paid. It's about holding people accountable, educating people. So we are wanting, doctors and healthcare providers to be educated about the ongoing genocide that's happening to our people, and to remind them of the past traumas that we've been through, the residential schools, the day schools, the Indian hospitals. Like, it's like, even my eldest son, he didn't understand that his grandfather, my dad, is a survivor of residential school too. So I'm affected by that. And like, he was told when he was younger that he would never be able to have children because of incidents that happened while in residential school as well. So we're just trying to correct those, or at least educate the people. And people aren't going to listen, and we understand that, but we just want accountability. We want survivors to feel represented. We want that advocacy work to continue, and we want our future generations to understand their rights as child bearers. So we're hoping just to keep this education going, so our daughters, our granddaughters, our nieces, they understand that they can realize what is going to happen if they don't properly educate themselves. Like, when I see survivors that have grandchildren, and their grandchildren, they listen in closer. They understand what happened and why their grandma's so angry all the time, and then they start to listen, and that knowledge is passed on to them, and just seeing their faces when they realize what happened and what can happen to them. Like, I feel like that's the best medicine, is just educating someone.
Okay. Thank you, Shelby. We do have some questions that are coming through on the chat here, and some of the questions are around repercussions, who is making the decisions, and whether or not doctors are losing their licenses. I feel like we need another discussion so we can dive deeper into this and see maybe from a legal perspective on what's happening with the doctors' licenses when they do this to their patients. Another comment is there seems to be a huge double standard regarding tubal litigation. Many white women have to fight for their tubal litigation because doctors refuse to do the procedure. Meanwhile, many Indigenous women are lied to, taken advantage of when they are in a vulnerable state, coerced, or have the procedure done without their knowledge. So that came up through chat. And we also have another question that's a really good one. Shouldn't the doctors, hospitals provide a legal advocate along with CFS? And how is it illegal that this happened to Shelby? So these are the type of questions that came through the chat. So I guess to close, I want to ask the panelists to offer their thoughts about what we can do to fix a broken system while also keeping the children's well-being at the center. We are thinking of a family where the mom is young and has 4 children apprehended. She has addiction issues, and no family members are able to raise the children. How can the children be given stability, safe care when the goal is reunification? And also, should the goal of unification remain indefinitely over the years of struggle? Is it so complex and heartbreaking all around? So, this was a question that the chat is asking the panelists to offer thoughts on. If you can give a quick comment on that, Vivian or Shelby.
I was just thinking of my son that when he went into a non-Indigenous home, I lost him permanently. I think it doesn't have to be family members, that it could be other Indigenous families on reserve that are stable and maybe can raise the child. Because isn't the child everyone's responsibility in the village? It should be that, as long as it's in a safe environment. Because I would like to see, say, if my grandchild, and if I couldn't raise my grandchild, then I would want to go back. I want my child to go back to my home community, just like the way my son was looked after by my sister for the year that I was in rehab, a year, and I knew I could focus on getting better, and my son was being looked after by my sister. She even nursed him. I was surprised at that. I told him about that early when he was in his 20s. I said, your auntie nursed you. She said, ew, but that but that was yeah. It doesn't have to be family members. It could be the Indigenous community back home, as long as they're stable and healed.
Absolutely, yes. Shelby, do you have any comments on that last
Yeah,
comment about how to fix a broken system while keeping the children's well-being at the center?
so aside from my work with the advocacy of forced and coerced sterilization, I also worked for the First Nation Family Advocate Office, which is an office here in Winnipeg that work with families who are going through the CFS system and that advocate to have children to be reunified with family or within kinship. So I kind of have a background with that, and how we can protect our children is figuring out the root causes, the systematic inequity. Sorry. So when children are apprehended, they look at family breakdown as an individual problem and not as a like a systematic problem. So I think figuring out what the root cause is and how to support the family during that time, um, like it intertwines with my new work with forced and coerced sterilization, because there's a lot of that family breakdown and those kinship disruptions. So I feel like to keep children safe, you have to seek out the root problem of why there is family breakdown. And instead of looking at it as an individual failure rather than a systematic failure, we can learn to support our families, our relatives, rather than justifying the apprehension. So, like a tree, looking at the root causes instead of the things that come up afterwards, the mental health, the addictions, the family breakdown. We figure out the problem before it's too late. And like we look just thinking of all the families I supported, it was way too late to figure out the root causes of the problems, and we're already at the branches where we're too focused on the problems that happen due to the root causes. So I really do advocate with figuring out the root causes before they become something more, in order to support our children and our relatives.
Okay, thank you, Shelby. We do have another question here. There are Given the ongoing impacts of residential school and how these harms are perpetuated through the current child welfare system, what meaningful actions can non Indigenous healthcare providers take to support change and contribute to healing and equity for Indigenous children, families, and communities? So, if
I keep
maybe,
hearing this about women, but I think we're forgetting the men as as part of this. We need to invite the men, the fathers, the grandfathers, and that in part of this circle. I think we're missing out a very important part of this healing journey. We have to involve the fathers. So we just got to mention them. Because just imagine how a father feels if his partner is sterilized and can no longer have children.
oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah,
So, from a father's perspective, what do they
mhm.
have to say?
Yeah. We
Okay.
need we need their voices added to this story.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. We're
So for the with the Survivor Circle for Reproductive Justice, we do support Indigenous. So that looks as an Inuit status and Métis people who are men, women, and gender diverse. So we do understand that there are men, there are two spirit, there are gender diverse people who have also been sterilized, but it's very less common for men and non gender diverse people to reach out. I see a comment from Sandra that speaks about advice with advocacy burnout, and in my position, even as a forced or coerced sterilization advocate, we suffer with compassion burnout, because every story you hear, every person you support, you want to make sure they're comfortable, you want to make them feel seen and heard, and you want to really get that out to them, that their story matters and they're supported and they're loved and they're not alone. And as Vivian was speaking, and she said just sharing her story, and helping one person, and that was my main goal for sharing my story. It was very fresh, very raw, and I remember my lawyer at the time, she asked me, why are you doing this, like what's your main goal? Like things could fail and everything could just go south, and you'll be very vulnerable. And I told her, me sharing my story is so important to me, because if I connect with at least one person and they say, hey, this story resonates with me, and I can help them realize that they were a survivor, that's my goal, is just to help at least one person.
Mhm.
So it's very important work.
mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm fortunate to be part of many circles. I belong to a grassroots community. We're the ones that block your roads. I'm not going to apologize. Um, the we are out there in the front, but behind the scenes, we sit by the sacred fire and we just chill. We talk with each other. We share each other. We support each other for a day or a night or a week. Then we go back out there. And if we can't take a, there's I usually talk about residential school, but I'm out there supporting missing and murdered women, men. I'm out there supporting child and family services advocates. So I I'm supporting them, but I don't sit in front of them. I don't take over their voice. I have my own, and they support me, and that helps with avoiding advocacy burnout for me, because I get a lot of support. Yeah.
Oh yes, all of this advocacy is all connected in one way or another. Supporting our missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and our
Mhm.
Two Spirit folks. So next, I want to just kind of wind down our conversation because we have a few minutes left. But I would like to ask Shelby and Vivian, what is one truth you want every person listening to today, and for those who are still learning, we have people that are tuning in for the first time that want to learn about the injustice that's happening to some of our people, and what do you want them to take away?
Okay, well, just this 2 weeks ago, um, I sat with a Presbyterian minister by the river. We sat and talked. When we found connections, I found out she was a grandmother. We shared our stories about our grandchildren, and that was it. There was no loud speeches. There was no loud marches. There was no signs. We just connected, and our
Mhm.
friendship got stronger. Simple as that.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Shelby. The one
Um,
thing that you would like for them to take away.
so one thing I would like everyone to take away is that forced and core sterilization isn't always black and white. There's gray in it. If you feel like your body knows, if you feel like you've been forced or coerced into sterilization, but sometimes it's foggy, you don't remember all the details. You can always, reach out. You'll get support. It's still happening to this day. It's happening, if you think I'm young, it's happening to minors, people who are involved with the CFS system. And for the question I see is, what advice would you give other Indigenous women who are pregnant to help them prepare for this potential uh, during delivery to help protect themselves? Is to always have a strong voice with them, or we are starting to get more sacred Indigenous doulas. Create a birth plan. Just make sure it's written down somewhere that you don't want this to happen, regardless of what the doctors say. Like, you need it written down. You need someone there who understands that you don't want this procedure to happen, regardless of what the healthcare providers say. So always keep yourself covered. Have a paper trail. Let someone know that you don't want this to happen to you.
Okay, thank you, Shelby. Thank you both for sharing your truths with us and everybody online today. I really appreciate you both. And I just want to take the moment to just kind of acknowledge that this is a safe space for us all. And thank you for keeping it so. Sandra?
Thank you. What a smooth handoff. um, that's my cue. In fact, to thank all three of you, Roxanne, for weaving the threads together so well, so that we can really understand this through line from experiences like yours, Vivian. Um, your experience of residential school and losing your family that way, having more family loss and losing your kids, Shelby, losing uh, everything that you shared, losing possibility, losing those precious first moments. Um, I can't tell you all how many thanks there have been in the Q&A. Um, yeah, too many to acknowledge. So just know you have reached a whole lot of people today. Um, there have been so many thanks for the emotional labor and the potentially traumatizing nature of sharing your experiences. So on behalf of the NCTR, we'll add our own thanks for your time and for the gift of your sharing today.
Yeah.
um, Thank you also to our tech team with Shapeshifter, to Mike for the French interpretation, and to all of you for coming today. And hopefully, we'll see you in our coming lunch and learns for the rest of the week.
Mhm.
Thanks, everyone. See you.
Bye.